Picture this. It's 3 in the morning. You're huddled in your hallway with your family, listening to the absolute roar of wind tearing at the walls outside. Then, suddenly, comes a massive crash. An old oak tree just sliced right through your roof. Eventually, the storm passes, the sun comes up, and you step outside to survey the devastation. Your home, literally your biggest asset, is severely damaged. What do you do right now? Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking the highly stressful, heavily legal process of filing a storm damage insurance claim, and we are going to transform it into a clear, totally manageable roadmap. Whether you're dealing with a catastrophic structural failure or maybe just a few missing shingles from a sudden hailstorm, the steps you take in those very first few hours and days, they dictate your entire recovery process. So if you walked out and saw that crushed roof, would you know your very next move? What's really interesting here is that knowing exactly what to do next can literally mean the difference between financial ruin and full property restoration. See, an insurance policy is a legally binding contract. If you don't know the rules of engagement, it's incredibly easy to make a simple misstep that leads to a denied or severely underpaid claim. But we're going to make absolutely sure that doesn't happen to you. All right, let's look at our roadmap for today. We'll be moving through the immediate aftermath, decoding your policy, the adjuster and estimate, navigating repairs and contractors, negotiating a settlement, and finally, preparedness and final takeaways. Section 1, the immediate aftermath. We have to start with this highly critical phase where your adrenaline is pumping, but you absolutely need to act with precision. First things first, your family's physical safety is the #1 priority, period. Check for downed power lines or the smell of gas, and if you suspect any kind of utility breach, evacuate and call for help immediately. Now, once it's completely safe, you need to comprehensively document the damage, room by room, before you move a single piece of debris. Grab your phone, take wide-angle photos, zoom in on the structural failures, and even take video walkthroughs where you narrate what you're seeing. Only after you've gathered all this evidence should you start making temporary repairs, like tarping a roof or boarding up shattered windows, just to mitigate further damage. And hey, make sure you keep every single receipt for those temporary materials. Now, be really careful here not to throw away any evidence or make permanent repairs just yet. You need to keep in mind that states like Florida have strict financial thresholds for emergency work if you don't have insurer sign-off. If you just go out and hire a crew to do massive water extraction and structural drying without getting approval first, you might hit a cap. For instance, you could be capped at the greater of $3,000 or 1% of your dwelling limit. Anything over that, you could get stuck paying it entirely out of pocket. So be extremely cautious with emergency repairs. Moving on to Section 2, decoding your insurance policy, because knowing exactly what you're entitled to in the fine print is your absolute best defense before you even make that initial phone call. Okay, this one is huge. You might assume you have a standard, flat $1,000 deductible across the board, right? Well, if you live in a coastal area that's prone to severe weather, your wind or hurricane deductible is likely calculated as a percentage of your home's total insured value. We're typically talking 1 to 5%. So put that into perspective. If your home is insured for $500,000, a 5% hurricane deductible means you owe $25,000 out of pocket before a single dime of insurance coverage actually kicks in. And this is exactly why you need to crunch those numbers right now. Understanding how these specific deductibles are calculated and what exact type of storm triggers them, like say a named storm versus just really high wind, can completely save you from a major financial shock later on. Here's another really critical term you need to know: ordinance and law. Standard policies explicitly exclude the cost of building code upgrades. So imagine your 20-year-old roof gets blown off, and the city says the new roof requires upgraded, expensive structural supports just to meet today's building code. Well, standard insurance won't pay for that upgrade. You literally need to have specifically purchased the ordinance and law endorsement to cover those added, sometimes massive expenses. All right, Section 3, the adjuster and estimate. It's time to actually face the insurance adjuster and figure out how your property is being valued. When the adjuster actually arrives at your property, you need to be physically present. Do not just let them wander around your house alone. You must hand them a highly detailed inventory of your damaged property. A really great pro tip here is to use the free NAIC My Home Scrapbook app. It lets you organize your personal property room by room, complete with photos, serial numbers, and purchase prices. Doing this makes the adjuster's job so much easier and, frankly, makes your final payout much more accurate. The payout you ultimately receive depends entirely on your settlement provision. This is absolutely vital to understand. ACV, or actual cash value, pays you the replacement cost minus depreciation. So it basically pays you what your 10-year-old couch was actually worth yesterday, not what a new one costs today. RCV, or replacement cost value, pays to fully replace the item with a brand new one. The way this usually works is they hand you the ACV check first and then send a second check for the difference once you can actually prove the item was replaced or the repair was completely finished.
Section 4. Navigating repairs and contractors. Once you've gotten an initial estimate in hand, you need a contractor to do the work. And unfortunately, this is where a lot of people get taken advantage of. The sad reality is that disasters attract scammers like a magnet. You have got to strictly avoid any contractor who exhibits these massive red flags. If a crew shows up unannounced demanding a huge cash deposit, send them packing. And absolutely avoid anyone who offers to waive your deductible. That's actually considered insurance fraud and is completely illegal in states like Texas. Remember, you are legally responsible for paying your own deductible. You should always file the claim directly yourself so you can retain total control over the communication with your insurer. Be incredibly wary of signing anything called an assignment of benefits, or AOB. Signing this legally transfers your claim rights directly to the contractor. It allows them to bill the insurance company directly, often at wildly inflated rates, and leaves you completely powerless if they do a shoddy job. In fact, states like Florida have heavily restricted AOBs for this exact reason. Make sure you keep your seat at the negotiating table. Which brings us to Section 5, negotiating a fair settlement. So what actually happens if the insurance company lowballs your claim or flat out refuses to pay for a proper repair? Claim disputes pop up all the time over mismatched siding or roofing. Let's say a storm wrecks one side of your house, but the manufacturer just doesn't make that exact yellow siding anymore. Your rights here vary wildly depending on your state. Just to compare, a homeowner in Ohio has really strong legal protections. The insurer might actually have to replace the whole house's siding to achieve a reasonably uniform appearance. But over in Wisconsin, they are only required to provide materials of like kind and quality, which means you could literally be stuck with a two-toned house unless you had purchased a specific matching endorsement.
So how do you actually fight back against an estimate you feel is way too low? Well, I'm going to let you in on a little industry secret. Xactimate. It's the standard software almost all insurance adjusters use to price out labor and materials. To level the playing field, have your own independent contractor write up their repair estimate using Xactimate too. This lets you do a direct apples-to-apples, line-by-line comparison. It makes it incredibly obvious if the insurance company somehow missed structural dimensions or used totally outdated local labor rates. Now, if you present your detailed independent estimate and you're still at a total impasse regarding the payout, you can escalate things. You have 3 concrete steps. Step 1, formally request a second inspection from a completely different adjuster. If that still fails, step 2 is considering hiring a licensed public adjuster. They are an independent expert who works exclusively for you, not the insurance company. And finally, step 3, you can invoke the appraisal clause in your policy. This is a formal mechanism where both sides hire independent appraisers and a neutral umpire makes a final binding decision on the actual cost of repairs. Okay, Section 6, preparedness and final takeaways. Because ultimately, all of this builds a huge case for being prepared. The best time to handle a storm claim is actually right now, before the storm ever hits. By strictly adhering to these core do's and don'ts, you take what is essentially a chaotic, completely overwhelming disaster and you turn it into a structured, winnable scenario. Remember, standard homeowners policies do not cover flooding from rising water. That requires a completely separate policy through the National Flood Insurance Program. Document aggressively, mitigate your damages safely, and never, ever let yourself be pressured by unscrupulous contractors. I want you to really think about your own home and family for a second. Think about the physical structures you own, the contents inside, and the area where you live. If the worst happened tonight, would your current policy actually rebuild your life? Or are there hidden exclusions and massive percentage deductibles lurking in the fine print that could financially ruin you? So please, do not wait for a disaster to strike to find out. Go grab your homeowner's insurance declarations page today. Dig into it. Find out exactly what your limits are, what those wind and hurricane deductibles actually look like in real dollars, and verify whether you have critical additions like that ordinance and law coverage we talked about. Just as a quick reminder, this explainer is meant for educational purposes only. You should always consult with a licensed insurance agent or legal expert regarding your specific policy and your unique situation. But as we sign off, I just want to leave you with that one final thought. If the winds start howling tonight, are you absolutely sure your policy is ready to protect your family's biggest asset? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and please stay safe out there.